to breathe. Breathe deeply. Come into the room. Be present. Be focused. Be at peace. In the words of the Reverend Kathleen McTeague, we come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's faces and see communion. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope, is hallowed by our presence together. Let us take this time for quiet reflection as we listen in silence to the Prelude. And I should preface that by saying, which I omitted here before, that the music today is being offered by the Kensington duo, Harry Seelig and my stepmother, Catherine Baker. Thank you so much. Andrea Griswold will come forward and light the chalice. And please join me in reading the words printed in your order of worship. We light this chalice for the light of truth. We light this chalice for the warmth of love. And we light this chalice for the energy of action in celebration of the life we share together. And you can remain seated since we are not singing, but please join in sharing hymn number 46, Now the Day is Over. You can read the words along and hum with our duo if you wish. We're singing hums this morning.
Unmute. This meeting is being recorded. Okay. No sound.
No sound. Yeah. Are we back to no sound again? Oh, sound is great. Okay, the sound is still here. Thank you. This is going to be a nightmare here. All right, and now please join in reading our responsive aspiration. These words are taken from our...
Some people do and some people don't. Turn on original sound, okay? Turn on original.
Okay, she's saying some have sound and some don't. I don't know how to deal with that. Okay. So, please join me in reading our responsive aspiration. Oh, okay. All right, join me in reading the Congregational Covenant. In this house, we covenant with one another to listen respectfully with an open mind and value our diversity as a source of our communal strength, to learn together and grow together, generously sharing our time, talents, and treasures, to celebrate the joy of discovery, embracing the fullest measure of our humanity from the wonder of youth to the wisdom of age, to openly share our laughter and our tears, showing reverence for the divine in all that is. Thank you, Kirsten. I guess we'll have to update this order of service here. Well, every week in our church, we take up an offering which gives us an opportunity to exercise the generosity of spirit that supports All Souls and its many ministries. We see this act of giving, of growing more generous in our hearts and our actions, as essential to our spiritual well-being. We will now receive the morning's offering. And for those of you online, we are accepting cryptocurrency. However, please, no Squid Game tokens. We lost our entire endowment last week in a sudden fluctuation, so it's a little cooler in here this morning than usual. But so just the right cryptocurrencies. So.
I'm not sure we have it. So far, it's just music. Wait.
Thank you. I'd like to share with you from my reading this morning a poem written by my grandmother, Adelaide Nichols Baker. It's called To a Changeling Child. And I'll offer you just a few words of glossary. This was written by a woman who was born in 1895, an era that was known as the gay 90s. And so for her, the word gay meant carefree and light and happy. A changeling, for those of you who have not heard the word, it comes from European folk tales and refers to the thought or the idea that at times the wee folk, the elves, the fairies, the trolls, would sometimes exchange their own child for a human child in the cradle, a changeling. And the word fae also comes from that folklore tradition, which means of the fairies, of the wee folk. So a little vocabulary for you from my grandmother. In you, I know at last my heritage, and whence I own the lift of laughing power, that even out of weakness and despair breaks into flower, and makes me feel a thing of light and air, not caught by failure, grief, nor age. For holding you against my heart today, my changeling child, scarce caught by flesh at all, yet vital with gay, triumphant flame, a miracle within a frame so small. I know myself, for one life cannot tame the mother of a changeling and half fae. And now we'll share together hymn number 159. This is my song. If you prefer the other words, you can read We Would Be One. They're both by Sibelius, or from the music of Sibelius. Thank you. And good morning again. In this congregation, we have a tradition of inviting our members into the pulpit to lead worship services, not just because we're thrifty New Englanders, but also with the aim of getting to know one another more deeply and enriching our communal spiritual life. In sharing part of my Unitarian Universalist story with you, I hope this spiritual gender reveal will help you answer these questions for yourself. Who is your engendering spirit? Or to put it another way, what is it that engenders your spiritual life? To engender can mean to give life and also to embody in a specific gender. As you listen to my story, think about engendering in both of these ways. You can let me know after the service how we do on this project together, if you wish. My full name is Andrew Nichols Baker. What's in a name? I'm named for my grandmother, Adelaide Nichols Baker. However, I was not her first choice. Her daughter Carol birthed a son and two daughters, but Carol was as strong-willed as her mother and did not opt for passing along the name Adelaide. Though popular in the 1890s when my grandmother was born, Adelaide had waned as a name choice by the 1950s, and perhaps was thought by Carol to be too heavy a handle for her girls. Adelaide's second child, my father, John, had 3 sons with his first wife, my mother, Sally. The eldest son received his father's and grandfather's name, John. The second son received the name of my mother's father, Kendall. If this is starting to sound like the book of Genesis, bear with me. We should be arriving at Revelations in about 15 minutes. With the patronymial succession thus completed, Adelaide was entirely boxed out. When I came along as an unexpected surprise in 1959, just 11 months after my brother Kendall, I embodied what appeared to be her last chance, a final opportunity for shared initials, if not a full name. And so my grandmother Adelaide got her wish. I imagine my father, diplomat that he was, presented me as a kind of peace offering. But knowing his mother's powers as a word sorceress, I think he gave me the name Andrew as a sort of spiritual talisman to protect against the possible cradle-swapping encroachments of her elven friends. Andrew comes from the Greek word andros, which means man. My father, like his father, was rooted in the practical world, flesh and blood, gain and loss, politics and war. He would only indulge his mother's changeling notions so far, or so he thought. As it turned out, a year after my birth, my father's foreign service career took us to Italy. I was called Andrea then, which is Andrew in Italian, by Maria, the woman who cared for me and taught me to speak her language for those first few years as my mother's manic depression deepened. I am married to another Andrea now, but that is mere coincidence, right? Of course, right. My mother ended her life on September 13th, 1962, when I was 3 years old. We returned to the United States and lived there for the next 4 years, next door to Grandma Adelaide and Grandpa Jack in Connecticut, and my father commuted to New York City to work at the United Nations. My brothers and I were not under Adelaide's direct care. There were several live-in caretakers with us until my father remarried in 1965. My stepmother, Catherine Baker, who is here today playing the music for you and for this service, did the hard work of raising me and my brothers to adulthood, along with her own 2 boys, all while building her own career as a family systems therapist. But Grandma Adelaide was there for me at a crucial time, when my primary maternal relationship was severed just as I was emerging into my self-aware and remembered self. Some of the songs she sang at bedtime when my father was away are still bound in our current UU hymn book, including Now the Day is Over. When we would sing This Is My Song at the UU Church in Westport, I much later came to understand that this was not just her favorite hymn, it really was her song. She lived those words and the values they stand for. My grandmother's life spanned the first 3/4 of the 20th century, and she dedicated her work to peacemaking with the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, all while witnessing 4 major wars. A suffragette in her college years, she and her artillery captain husband raised funds in the 1920s to help rebuild French villages destroyed by German, French, English, and American shelling during World War I. And then she saw her son off to serve in Japan in the aftermath of World War II. She was an English teacher, a poet and playwright, but I knew her only as Grandma. At Grandma's house, we would collect new fallen snow and make snow ice cream in winter. And in summer, she would sometimes make curiously delicious watermelon rind pickles. She would drive us to the beach over rolling hills in her blue Rambler, singing rig-a-jig-jig and away we go, with 3 boys bouncing in a back seat entirely devoid of seatbelts. And her hi-ho, hi-ho, hi-ho would ring out just as we crested one of the shore road hills at good speed, our bottoms a little airborne and our stomachs dropping out with that satisfying amusement park feel. Unsafe parenting by 21st century standards, but a whole lot of fun. I am a Unitarian Universalist, not because of my grandmother's UU lineage. She was the daughter and great-granddaughter of Unitarian ministers, but because of her love. Her caring presence helped put my feet back underneath me. Love in its most essential form is being there. Grandma Adelaide stepped up, and not just for me and my brothers. When her nephew Patrick had no mother or father to care for him, Adelaide and Jack adopted him and helped him start off in life. When Adelaide's elderly cousin Winifred went blind, they took her in and made a room for her on the ground floor. We called her Aunt Petey. As a 5 or 6-year-old boy, I remember leading Aunt Petey into Sunday lunch and marveling at her green shaded glasses and the fantastic map of blue veins tracing river deltas across her pale face and hands. Watching her eat green peas with a fork was also an endless source of fascination for me, along with some silent wagering as to whether the peas would complete the journey to her mouth. Aunt Petey was the embodiment to me of what it meant to be really old. But she was also a magical presence in my life because Adelaide and Jack were there for her. They lived their values in the fabric of steadfastness and caring they wove together. In 1974, my father must have gotten word that the end was near for Grandma Adelaide. She had congestive heart failure. I don't remember much discussion about it, but I was selected as the family representative to be with my grandmother in her dying. My father seemed to intuit that this was the right fit, even though I was just 14 years old then. Perhaps this was the mission that my naming had prepared me for. I traveled up from Washington, D.C. to Westport, Connecticut, and spent those last 2 weeks of Grandma Adelaide's life with her and with my Aunt Carol. I didn't have much to offer as a 14-year-old, certainly no training in hospice care. I would carry her oxygen tank so that she could walk out to her beloved herb garden and just sit in the warm summer air, just being together. When Adelaide's house was sold and the heirlooms divided up, there was one thing I carried away. That is the snake plant that you see here serving as our altarpiece this morning. It lived in Grandma Adelaide's living room all the years of my childhood, and probably for many years before, overseeing family gatherings and countless games of mahjong. I have carried that snake plant with me for nearly 50 years, moving it to 14 different houses and apartments. It is a common houseplant, drought resistant, and fortunately, nearly impossible to kill. Our church for this morning will be its 15th home. We have grown up together, this snake plant and I, like the 2 maples in my yard that have become one tree. An embodiment of Adelaide's memory, this snake plant has become for me a kind of living chalice, a green, eternal flame. If I were to come right out and describe my spiritual gender, I know now it must contain part grandmother and part snake plant fused with all the rest. Not male or female or even entirely human, a changeling and half fae, as she would say. Do each of us in our unclothed inner lives reveal such a singular spiritual identity? You might wonder that I make myself the measure of a potted plant, but if you consider the comparison more carefully, it is the plant that gets the lesser end of that bargain. In generative terms, this common plant has not one, but two reproductive strategies. It pollinates and also sends up new shoots from below the ground, and a most miraculous third as well. When its leaves are cut, the cells that once drew water upward can repurpose themselves as root cells to replant itself and grow again. Such regenerative intelligence evolved over tens of millions of years. We humans can count only a few million years in hominid form toward our own checkered history in the wisdom department. Unlike the eastern emerald Elysia, also known as the green sea slug, which can eat food and also convert light into energy, I have not yet found a way to literally merge with my snake plant self. I cannot perform photosynthesis. Yet though I cannot regenerate a severed limb, I can incorporate the wisdom of my plant-based self and draw strength from what has been severed in my life to make new life and connectedness. I am blessed to support and be supported by a vast network of step families and friendships, only some of whom I share DNA with. These are kinships formed in being together for each other. And these are just other words for love. So I suppose at the core, I'm a bit more of a universalist at heart, even though my head still tilts toward the Unitarian side. In the world of flesh and blood, I still use the simple pronouns he and him for practical purposes. No one wants to hear this sermon in every passing greeting. The outward form you see before you presents as straight and white and male, although if viewed more closely, it might be more accurate to qualify with mostly and almost, and maybe not at all. In this, I count the great musician Prince as my mentor and predecessor, who pioneered the use of a personal wordless symbol to proclaim a singular gender identity. Using this principle, we can now all be gendered to the nth degree. As a man of privilege, I count among my privileges this ability to construct a singular spiritual identity. But for this privilege, I owe many debts to both my spiritual and practical forebears. My spiritual debt is to Carl Jung and to the mystics before him who, in their alchemical meditations, forged a union of their masculine and feminine persona in what they called the divine marriage. With help from my grandmother Adelaide and this snake plant, I practice my own form of alchemy and so convert the nigredo, nothingness, despair, into the pure gold of being. In the practical world of flesh and blood, I am also deeply indebted to all who have given their lives to resist oppression and to construct positive ethnic and gender identities. Women, Black, Latino, lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and more. In that process, they have renamed themselves, claiming affirming identities and even making old words new, like Adelaide's beloved gay. As a 21st century straight white man, I am freer too for their efforts, both within myself and in my efforts to help others. We are not simply free to explore the truth within ourselves. Our individual freedoms are enmeshed in our complex history. We are tied together in an imperfect but evolving social contract. The broader and more inclusive freedoms we enjoy as a society today are still evolving, and only because of our ongoing struggle to make free and equal human relationships real, not just in law, but in our hearts as well. In thinking deeply about who we are, both in spirit and in flesh, we must consider the paradoxical nature of both the self and the tribe. As humans, we are a social species, governed by two competing evolutionary mandates that have helped ensure our survival. We gather in tribes for protection, to collaborate and innovate, and for a sense of belonging. We are also governed by the innate principle of exogamy, our outmarrying impulse, a corollary to the incest taboo. That is to say, we are impelled to procreate outside our tribe in order to diversify our gene pool. The downside of our tribal tendency is that creating a sense of belonging inevitably generates an other, which leads to exclusion, exploitation, and war. The upside is that nature is simultaneously urging us to reach out across the boundaries we have set up, marry those others, and incorporate them into a larger and more inclusive tribe. If only human history were as friendly as that sounds, and not the chronicle of raiding, trading, plundering, war, and exploitation we have compiled so far. But that is our challenge. If we, as Americans, want to live up to the purpose of our Constitution, to help it evolve toward new births of freedom and enfranchisement, we have to mobilize our tribes, ethnic and gender-based, social and professional, religious, and link them together. If we want to do big things like securing Medicare for all, protecting voting rights, reforming our exploitive immigration system, we will need to think beyond our tribal interests to our common interests. And if we want to do even bigger things together, reduce the greenhouse gases that are warming our planet and bringing on climate disaster, drought, floods, rising seas, and extinction. I told you I was going to get to Revelations. We need to reach farther still beyond the tribal boundary of our own species. We don't have time to become emerald green sea slugs, but we can learn from them and collaborate for mutual protection of the world we share together. To undertake that world requires a strong sense of self. Integral to that strength is the understanding that at the core, the self is a construct, an illusion. At the molecular level, we are bags of water. At the subatomic level, we are mostly empty space, crisscrossed and animated by impulses of energy. You and I are just two small people in this crazy world. We UUs are a tiny tribe of maybe a few 100,000 souls together. Yet look at just one of our energetic and enterprising foremothers, Clara Barton, who used her logistical genius to bring wagon loads of medical supplies to wounded soldiers on Civil War battlefields, and later laid the groundwork for what became the American Red Cross, the institution we use to respond to disasters of all kinds. We will need many Clara Bartons to respond effectively to the global climate emergency. Energy and light. That's what we bring to the table. And music too. May it be so. Hello, Diana. Now is the time in our service for sharing joys and sorrows. If you have a sorrow that needs the help of this community to carry it, or a joy so great that you must share it, now is the time. You may share with the congregation. I will bring you a microphone. That's okay, David, I can do it. Please note that this is not a time for personal or political announcements. We care for each other by being true to the purpose of this time. We also care for each other by our brevity, so please be brief. A very great joy that we feel today is to have visitors. During this time of joys and sorrows, we invite you to introduce yourself. While this is not required, we would love the opportunity to welcome you. And for those of you online, if you would like to share in a chat, Kate will share your joy with us if you'd like to do that. Now is the time for welcoming visitors and sharing joys and sorrows. And before I pass the microphone around, I'd like to begin with my own both joy and sorrow, which I think is one that belongs to all of us, and that is to share the joy of Nancy Buchanan's life. Nancy died last Sunday, and to send our hearts out in sorrow to her daughters, Jennifer and Anne and Jane. Nancy was a wonderful person. She, to me, was one of the mothers of this church, and she gave so much of her life to this congregation. It's a joy to remember her.
So Gil says that he, she, they, he is joyful that he's related to Andrew. Thank you, cousin.
Other joys and sorrows.
Hi, I'm Rob. Thank you, Andrew. Very moving. David, if you would light a candle of sorrow for my longtime dancing buddy Monique, who, despite being vaccinated, is suffering COVID-19. Hopefully not the kind that would send her all the way to the hospital and all that stuff, but still scary and painful. And a candle of joy in the middle of the pandemic. I met a wonderful woman, Debka, and it's going to be her birthday this week. And I'm looking forward to celebrating that with her.
My name's Russ. I'm your greeter today, and I have two joys. First one is that I don't have an order of worship to read from because I handed them all out today. And that's the first time that I've seen that since we've been meeting in here in September. Maybe few were printed, but still, I'm glad for that. And my other joy is, and I'm admitting my lack, whatever, when I went to remove the air conditioner from the office a couple of days ago, I wasn't paying attention that it was not really securely enough placed. And as I opened up the window, it started going out the window. And I grabbed the cord, but I'm not that strong to be able to hold it back in. I looked out the window and said, okay, it's not going to be that far a drop. And I lowered, and yes, I let it go, and it hit the ground, but it's still working, and it'll be good for next season. Thank you.
Did you want to share a joy? Tell us who you are. Want to say something? That's my granddaughter, Diana.
My name is Molly. It was a joy on Friday to go down to Amherst to have tea with a newly arrived Afghan couple, Quadria and Feroz, who are hoping to move to Greenfield.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Spyrer. I've been friends with Andrew since we were freshmen at Hobart College at age
My name is Carrie Nichols Baker, also
18,
granddaughter of
so
Adelaide.
it's getting to go.
And I'm joined here by my father, Patrick Nichols Baker, her Adelaide's son, and B. Blake, and Peter Titleman, and my aunt Tinka. So we're just thrilled to be here. And I'm just so thankful, Andrew, for your sermon. You were just a brilliant speaker, combining humor and wisdom and history and science all together in an incredible package of really inspiring words. Thank you.
I'm Beatrice Blake from Westmoreland, and it was a great joy to me to hear your sermon, and it just makes me cry, tears of joy.
Okay, Chris. Chris, can you speak? Chris, it's your turn. You're up.
Oh, is the mic on?
Yes.
Well, hi, everybody. Good morning. Lovely to be with you. I'm Chris Spyrer. I'm an old friend of Andrew's from college days, from freshman year at Hobart. So we've been friends since we were 18. And it's wonderful to, Andrew, to hear your reveal and the journey you've been on. I'm sorry I didn't get to see Catherine. I could hear her, but not see her. So greetings. It's been a long time and wonderful to know you're still playing music.
Also, we have, let's see, in the chat. Sarah Allen.
Oh, I can chime in.
Okay.
I was born Sarah Bragg Lindsley, never knew my Aunt Sally. So I'm also joyfully related to Andrew, and my mom carried on the naming after relatives, forebears, and wonderful to hear my Aunt Tinka, who I think was playing earlier, who I knew in my growing up. And Andrew, just what a lovely servant. I know it's a sermon. And now I'm speaking too much, but never knew about the snake plant story, and lovely to hear that.
Thank you so much.
Anyone else?
Well, for all those joys and sorrows, and for those that are still in our hearts, we light these candles of remembrance. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring the gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. May it be so.
Hi, Ulysses. Nice to see you again on here. It's been a while.
How's it going?
Good.
Yeah, I feel like I missed some good weeks. I'm bummed about it.
Well, I think they're on YouTube. I think you can actually still
Oh
watch
yeah.
them if you want. It won't be like being live with people, but we're only virtually live. Anyway.
Yeah. Thanks for the reminder. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
How's everybody else doing this morning?
Good.
Say hi.
Did you get your sound problems worked out, Pamela?
Oh, yeah, I've finally got the sound worked out, but the video won't work now.
Bummer.
Yep. I don't know why.
Mhm.
Alice, if I remember correctly, you're kind of new to this?
Yes.
Like last week, I think?
Yes.
Yeah, well, welcome back.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Hi, Kate. Say hi to Kate, Skylar. That's
Even if you can't see her name's there.
Yeah, that's Skylar, my granddaughter.
Ah,
Say, come say hi.
hi, Skylar.
Well, come.
It's still recording.
Ah, yes, Kate, you might want to